from Cincinnati Observatory Center. So he's come to talk to us. We're very pleased that he's here. He's the Director of Secondary Education at Xavier College and a volunteer presenter at the Cincinnati Observatory Center. He also has a strong interest in astronomy history. And just a little summary of what he's going to talk about here. The descriptor of amateur is often used in a derisive way to describe a person who lacks serious involvement in an area, or even incompetency. But did you know that an amateur astronomer was the first to suggest the true nature of galaxies 50 years before Edwin Hubble? Today, amateur astronomers are at the forefront of astronomical discovery. It's even possible for an amateur to get observing time on the Hubble Space Telescope. Contributions by William Parsons, O.M. Mitchell, Russell Porter, and present-day amateurs will be highlighted by Jeff Hutton. So let's give a warm welcome to Jeff.
We'll start with a poem. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when sitting, I heard the learned astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon I counted. I became tired and sick, still rising and gliding out. I wandered out by myself into the mystical moist air, and from time to time looked up at the imperfect silence at the stars. Not the most complimentary thing about astronomy, but the reason I bring this up, number one, Walt Whitman, a native of New England, where we are, and this gentleman, Ormsby Mitchell. How many of you have ever heard of Ormsby Mitchell? There's a few. Excellent. It is probable that Ormsby Mitchell was that learned astronomer mentioned by Whitman. And Ormsby, by the way, was an amateur astronomer. The only training this man ever had in astronomy was a 2-week crash course from Georgia Airy in England. Ormsby was a West Point graduate. He graduated 15th class behind this more famous classmate. You might recognize this fellow? Bingo! Always somebody in the audience who screws that. You're right. Robert E. Lee. Mitchell. Now, this guy could sell, if you've heard the term ice Eskimos, this man could sell anything to anybody, I think. What Mitchell did in the 1840s, he went around to the citizens of Cincinnati of that time and convinced many of them to donate $25 towards the construction of an observatory. Now, in today's dollars, that would be several thousand. So, may I have a couple $1,000 so I can build an observatory? And, you know, most people's images of a city tend to run 100 years behind. You've heard Cincinnati referred to as Porkopolis. At this time, the streets were not paved. Dust was raised daily by herds of hogs and pigs running through the streets. This was the city that Ormsby lived in. This is the observatory he eventually built in 1845. That makes the Cincinnati Observatory the oldest continuously operating observatory that is professional in the United States. You will not find this building standing today. It was built on Mount Ida, outside of Cincinnati. Mount Ida was later renamed Mount Adams in honor of John Quincy Adams, who came to the city to dedicate the observatory. Mitchell was a Civil War general when the Civil War came along. As a matter of fact, if you're into the Civil War history, you probably are aware that Lincoln had an awful time finding competent generals in the first part of the war. He had one in Mitchell. Mitchell himself captured all of western Kentucky, captured Nashville, long before Ulysses Grant was on the scene. However, Mitchell had a habit, and whenever he had to work for somebody he didn't like or thought was of inferior intelligence, he quit. And he resigned his commission. He did this 3 times. Well, the 3rd time he resigned his commission, Lincoln had had enough. He sent him to oversee a slave resettlement camp in North Carolina, and he died in 1862 of yellow fever. So, a near miss in history. This was the Cincinnati Observatory as it was moved, after it was moved in 1873 to what is now known as Mount Lookout, clever name. It was moved about 10 miles to get it away from the soft coal burning pollution that the Cincinnati Valley, the Ohio Valley was heir to. Notice the dome. How many of you have ever seen a picture of the Ohio Capitol? So they call it the cheese box turret. This is a cheese box turret, very similar to the Ohio Capitol. This is that same building as the Pierce today. It's called the Herschel building, named for former director. The Cincinnati Observatory Center consists of two buildings. The one I have circled here is the Herschel building. It contains the larger of the two instruments. It originally held the telescope I want to get back to in just a minute that Mitchell was able to get from Germany. It now holds a 16-inch Alvin Clark refractor built in 1904. It is a beautiful instrument. It is a monster to use, but it is one of the most accurate clock drives I've ever used, and it's totally weight-driven. It's totally weight-driven. It outperforms most of the mechanical drives, minus correction, that you'll find. The second building is the Mitchell building, named for Ormsby Mitchell. The smaller building circled. Anybody knows, you see the main dome, anybody see a dome like the little ice cream cone dome in the corner? Ever seen that one before? I hadn't either. That's a comet-seeking dome. That's our comet. What originally was installed in that telescope was a 4-inch f8 or f10 refractor, which has long been lost. In the 1870s or so, the only way to find a comet was when it was near the sun, near sunrise or sunset. So that was the only area of the sky you had to look was down low to the horizon. So the opening actually is wider at the bottom and very narrow at the top. This is a telescope that Ormsby Mitchell obtained from the firm of Merck and Mahler in 1845. At the time, it was a mate to the largest refractor in the world in Pulkovo, Russia. It has a Cooper's barrel tube, basically. It is covered with a veneer of mahogany, beautiful brass fittings. It's a very nice scope. Dean Regas is an amateur astronomer. We're talking about amateur astronomers today. Dean was one of those lucky amateurs, I'm always jealous, that actually got a job doing what he loves doing. He is now the outreach astronomer for the COC. Does anybody recognize his face by any chance? Ever seen his face before? Anybody watched the Horkheimer Stargazer series on PBS? Dean was actually chosen to co-host that show after Dr. Horkheimer passed away. So here's a guy that's going far. We are all just a bunch of amateurs. Be proud. Wear that mantle happily. Here's another picture of me in front of the Cincinnati Observatory, the Mitchell building. Let us now transport ourselves to Ireland. This is the Lord Rosse telescope, same scale, built by William Parsons, the third Earl of Rosse, an amateur astronomer. You're going to hear this a lot. And actually saw first light the same year the Merck and Mahler did over in Cincinnati. I spent a great deal of research trying to find out if Mitchell and Parsons ever met. I guess they haven't. They didn't. 6-foot telescope. At that time, they described telescopes by their diameters, not by their lengths, or by the lengths of the diameter. Anyway, Mitchell or Parsons did this stuff. He, after a few others, was one of the first to realize that aperture mattered. If you wanted to learn about the actual universe, you needed a lot of light. A quote, "The time is not too far distant when data shall be collected sufficient to afford us an insight into the construction of the material universe." Whoa, what's the big deal about that? Well, at the time of Parsons and Mitchell, people were crazy for two things in astronomy. Double stars, they love double stars. They couldn't get enough of them. As a matter of fact, Antares was discovered to be a double star using the Merck and Mahler telescope in Cincinnati. And positional astronomy. The telescopes are called equatorials, because of the clockwise. The one know very precisely where things were in the sky. Parsons was less interested. He was more interested in what's up there. What are these things made of? The material universe. 50 years before Hubble, Parsons made a very famous observation of M51, the Rocco galaxy, where he hinted, he didn't claim, but he hinted that he might have seen individual stars. He was not a person who was born, he was an amateur, he was very humble, he didn't publish what he said, but he allowed anybody who wanted to use his observations to carry them further. But it was actually Parsons, not Hubble, that first suggested the true nature of galaxies. Short tour, I thought you might like to see what this thing looks like today. It was called the Leviathan. That's an old-fashioned term for something really huge. As you approach the telescope, there's a nice little nature trail. It's beautiful. Anybody ever been over there? Over Ireland, over kind of awful? You have? Wonderful. Trip down memory lane. Correct me if I make a mistake, please. Anyway, you walk around this beautiful nature trail. You approach the telescope like this. You'll notice it was cloudy. It was always cloudy. I wish it was a little darker room. I can't help that. A couple things you might notice about the front piece of this telescope. Anybody see a finder? Parsons did not believe in finders. Religious thing, I don't know. He did not believe in finders. What he used were two eyepieces. These eyepieces were on a slide. Okay? The large eyepiece is low 275 power eyepiece. That's a low power. And then you have the high power eyepiece, and they were connected by cable through a weight and pulley system. So after he found an object in its wide field, 270 power, he would grab the cable, slide the cable down, slide the high power eyepiece up into place. Clever man. Parsons even invented a steam machine, steam pressure machine to actually grind the mirror for him. And that's a whole another story. I'll go into that some other time. In case you want to know what the secondary looks like in this telescope, that's the size secondary takes. How many of you own large dogs? 16-inch bigger. And besides building, what's half the fun? Looking through it, right? What's half the fun of looking through it? Sharing it. That's very good. I'm thinking of something more basic. Getting to the eyepiece. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a slide here. I forgot I did this. Before I go talk about that, Parsons was also the first one to invent the multi-point suspension cell that you all have in your telescopes. That was a William Parsons invention. George Airy, the same person who schooled Mitchell those years before, noticed that there was astigmatism in the Great Leviathan. They determined it was because the mirror was flexing like a pancake, and this is designed for a 72-point flotation cell. The mirror weighs, I can think the mirror weighs something like 30 tons, no, 13 tons. I don't know, do you remember? I get it. A lot, but really heavy. It was really, really heavy. Okay, now getting to the eyepiece is half the fun. I hope you can see this. I will turn myself into a line drawing. When the telescope is in the rest position, it is operated by a pulley and a series of counterweights. It's an out-azimuth mount, strictly. When you want to look up, you have your 10 assistants, well not 10, 5 assistants, strong men, field workers, turn this crank. The telescope points up. But now the eyepiece is 52 feet in the air. I said that right, 52 feet in the air. How do you get there? We've heard of a flying bridge. Well, so this object, this thing on rails, moves over to the eyepiece. And so it is curved. So over maybe 30 degrees, or 20 degrees, you can actually get to the eyepiece if you're brave enough. I'm told there were never any injuries, but who would know? If the telescope's at a roughly 45-degree angle, that's too low to reach with the flying bridge. So you have this little system. It's actually a railroad car, and the entire railroad car assembly rolls up these ladders. They're not really ladders, they're supports. So you roll that up, and you get to the eyepiece that way. The telescope moves side by side, by the way, I didn't mention that. There is a crank by the eyepiece, and it literally has a rack and pinion on a curved rack. And the whole telescope is mounted on a big universal joint down by the mirror box. And you literally crank yourself side by side. You can see the meridian for about 2 hours. So, not bad, not bad. William and Caroline Herschel preceded William Parsons and probably gave him the idea of the usefulness of large aperture. Herschel, again, an amateur, he was a musician, he was not a professional astronomer. He and his sister made many observations. Of course, he is the discoverer of Uranus. Why? Just because he looked around. He also discovered that infrared heat, or infrared light, or light beyond the red of the spectrum, which is infrared, produces heat. There's some other things, I'm forgetting what it all I did. The guy was a polymath, an amateur astronomer. Herschel's 4-foot telescope, again, 4-foot diameter telescope, was built almost a century before Parsons came along. And he has his own orbital observatory, which, not surprisingly, is an infrared observatory, as is fitting. In my research, I found the first astrophotographer, first recognized astrophotographer, was Isaac Roberts in England. He actually kind of took the astrograph idea a little bit. He had a Newtonian reflector measured, and where the back behind where the secondary was set, he mounted a glass plate. And this is one of his early photographs of course, the Andromeda Galaxy. Then there was this gentleman. Who knows who this guy is? Founder of this place. Russell Porter. He called his fellow telescope makers TNs, telescope nuts, and he's what got this place started. If you want to know, if you don't know, you want to. Supporting, one time he was driving along when he was working in California, he saw this kid in his backyard or front yard fooling with this slightly rickety little telescope. He told him to stop the car. I want to talk to this kid. So somebody apparently had a camera ready. In case you didn't know this, Porter was an Arctic explorer, and during one of his trips to Greenland, he had to overwinter. He was forced to overwinter in Greenland, and as a result, he contracted an ear infection, and he lost most of his hearing. So oftentimes you'll see him with like a half a headpiece and a little microphone on his chest. That's why that's the case. You've all seen the Porter telescope, correct? You've been up to the Harkness House? Well, this happens to be an example owned by the Cincinnati Observatory Center. About a year ago, the Smithsonian came to visit and helping set the place up. They said that's actually a better example of the Porter telescope than exists in the Smithsonian. It is immaculate, except the coating on the mirror is about gone. Very fine detail. You can use them. I love using them. Anybody pick one of these guys up? It's about 100 pounds. Really, really heavy. Okay. Jump ahead, sort of. George Ellery Hale. I guess you'd call him an amateur astronomer. He had his father supported his hobby quite a bit. Of course, he's known as sort of the pusher of people in this country to build large telescopes. The 40-inch Yerkes telescope, of course, is his creation. 60-inch and 100-inch telescopes at Mount Wilson. And, of course, an even larger telescope in California. Well, he had heard of Russell Porter. He had heard of what he was doing out here in Springfield, and he sent some representatives, asked him if he'd help them, he'd join the Palomar team. And, Russell's typical pose, well, I don't know if I'm really smart to help you guys. Well, he didn't actually design the 200-inch, but his ideas pretty much became the design of that telescope. He was beating them into work, coming up with ideas, build this thing. Here are some examples. Scott Cardell is the historian for Palomar Observatory. He sent me a bunch of pictures and images and drawings of tried and not succeeded ideas of how this thing was built. One in the upper right is probably closest to what really exists. Porter had this amazing ability to see inside a machine as if he had X-ray vision, which is tough enough, but he could see inside a machine that hadn't been built yet. In fact, the people building the 200-inch actually used his X-ray drawings, his perspective X-ray drawings, as much as the engineering drawings that the architects put together. Here's an example of the 48-inch Schmidt telescope, or Schmidt camera, excuse me, did I say that right? This is my favorite picture of it. Can you spot this man anywhere? I'll stand to the side. Who's the first one to find him? Put your hand up to find him. There, this is so typical. He was just there. He was just there, kind of offering those little gems of advice. This is when the mirror blank had arrived from Corning in New York prior to grinding. He became quickly integrated into this high-powered team of people. John Anderson was a professional astronomer, he's an instrument maker, he knew how to make telescopes. Captain Stanley McDowell built the 1/10 scale model. This is really cool. 1982 or so, we were vacationing in California. We were able to get in to see the 1/10 scale model. My gosh, it looks like the polymer telescope. I can't believe it. Other than that, it's dead ringer. He designed this as an engineering model after, of course, Porter's suggestions. Max Mason, standing next to Porter, actually ran the entire construction project. Probably the most famous picture Porter made of the 200-inch telescope. He also designed many of the buildings. Have you ever been to Palomar? Okay, have you noticed the buildings are kind of like New England kind of looking? He designed those buildings. I mean, man was unstoppable. Here's the monastery, as you call it. At the time, they didn't allow women on the mountain at night tubes drinking. And 48-inch Schmidt camera telescope in the back. Now, here's a drawing of or from one of the brochures of the 200-inch telescope. And I want you to kind of think back to the Garden telescope. We'll put it in line drawing form. One of probably the most remarkable part about the Garden telescope is the split ring design, this horseshoe design demand. Well, he got to thinking, that might work for the 200-inch. So the similarity is pretty obvious, right? So that is Porter's design. You have a lot to live up to with the name founding Stellafane telescope makers in Russell Porter. Here's a picture we took of a friend of mine standing on the catwalk of the 200-inch dome, just in case you want to have some sense of scale, in case you need that. World War II comes along. Construction of the Palomar telescope stops. All the industries. One of the problems is that there were not all the optical companies were in Germany and Japan. Russell Porter said, "Hey, I can build these sites for you." And he literally got the TMs, the telescope nuts from this area, in their basements and garages to make these roof prism assemblies for cannon sights. And he made something like 20% of them for the U.S. output. And of course, just in case you didn't know, that's how they're used in the Stinger binoculars and the roof prism binoculars. This is a picture of a 20th century astronomer. This happens to be Ormsby, our friend. Here's a picture of a mid-20th century astronomer gazing at Whirlpool Galaxy. Good enough. Most professionals, as you know, many amateurs don't look through a telescope. There are about 59 facilities in the world that have the major observatories. Most of the major telescopes live at these places. And in case you'd like to write that down, that's a nice site to go to and kind of keep up on that. They update that periodically. I contacted several telescope making companies, Meade, Stellafane, etc. And I wanted to get some idea of what their sales are like. So we sold about $23 million in telescopes in 1 year. Stellafane wouldn't tell me, but I'm guessing it's about the same. There are two branches of amateur research as I see it. This is opinion time. You've got the observers. I use David Levy as kind of my poster child for that. And in examples, Anthony Wesley, Canberra astronomer, first saw the recent impacts on Jupiter. Chris Gabo was the first to notice the reemergence of Jupiter's equatorial belt. Tom Dobbins saw the flashes on Mars, which are, of course, all frost. We're pretty sure they are. This young lady, have I seen this young lady before? You've seen the BBC before? Why is this girl smiling? She was a 10-year-old discovered a supernova, the youngest person to find a supernova. So I take you now over to the other side of the world, and that would mean that people use computers, the internet. Lots being done. The AESO, again, I'm just going to run through these briefly. I found that when I started doing this research, I became overwhelmed with the number of modern amateur activities. So I just decided to kind of run through these briefly. Many of you know what's going on. One I left out, I just realized, was the gamma ray bursters. UnmannedSpaceTrack.com. Remember I seen this one? You can actually download pictures from JPL on your own computer using Photoshop and process them yourself. This is an example of the storm on Saturn. This was what's this showing? Images of Mars, I don't remember. There's some very significant thing I printed just put on the spine. This is kind of cool. I love this one. I put this blog up here. Here's the interpreter. It tracks hobbies. It's short for opportunity, right? You have to on personal terms and stuff. And so these are some of the things that amateurs are doing, processing these. Finally, should you wish to get time on the Hubble Space Telescope, write this down quick. And you can actually get time. They actually give time to amateurs on the Hubble Space Telescope, should you be interested. And of course, this will all be on the website, so you don't have to worry too much about that. In the movies, Ellie Arroway is a child, Ellie Arroway, of course, in Contact is an adult. Nice story, beautiful story about astronomy. I love it. So basically, we're all here just because we love this stuff, right? There's not a logical reason we do this. This is an expensive, uncomfortable hobby. But it's just cool. And that's what I'm going to do. This is cool. Thank you very much.